From October 14th to the 27th, 1947, more than 200 forest fires raged throughout Maine, consuming nearly 250,000 acres of prime forests, and in some cases wiping out entire towns. York, Oxford, and Hancock counties were especially hard hit. Several others throughout Maine were threatened. In many cases, fierce winds gusting up to 80 miles an hour drove these fires so rapidly that hundreds of homeowners escaped the massive flame fronts with only the clothes they were wearing. Generations of heirlooms and other prized possessions were lost forever. In 1947, fire officials on both the local and state levels had little ability to communicate with each other, complicating the situation. And no one was prepared for a disaster of this magnitude. Drought conditions existed as little or no rain fell during the 3 months leading into October. The weather for the entire forest fire season was unusual, going from one extreme to another. In early March, an abnormally warm period saw temperatures reaching into the high 80s, causing snow to melt quickly and disappear from fields and woods at about the same time. To those engaged in forest fire control, this was an ominous sign. However, the months of April through June were cold and wet. By mid-July, a complete reversal of weather and ground conditions took place and continued well into fall. During that period, 108 days passed without any appreciable rain. The dryness of the soil was reflected in the foliage, especially with hardwoods. The lack of moisture caused the leaves to dry and fall prematurely. Vegetation was bone dry, and Maine was ripe for burning.
Well, sir, there were these little fires starting up here and there. Not much to begin with, not too serious. A bucket of water would have fixed every one of them to start with. Of course, there were lots of dry grass and leaves to feed on. And yet I believe a couple of good men with the right tools could have put that little fire out. Getting bigger, isn't she? Just the same, I think a good crew of forest firefighters could still lick this fire. But the wind, that wind's certainly building up.
Then it happened. The wind built up in fury. The flames speeded along their fiery path, forward and upward. Smoke masked the face of the warm sun. This was no longer a simple little fire. This was the beginning of a flaming giant. There's no doubt about it. The forest was ripe for destruction. Fire reaped a harvest. It was too late now for buckets of water and small crews of firefighters. With the wind strong behind it, the fire roared through the tinder-dry forest. The men rallied round and did their level best to check the fire's terrible spread. For some sections, there was little hope at all. People had to flee from their homes in the face of the onrushing flames. Not only individual homes, but entire communities had to be evacuated. There was time to take out only the most cherished belongings.
It was a very hot day, and knowing the fire was in progress, I was helping my mother make corn chowder to take to the fire line that evening. And at noon they came and picked it up. Told us that no problems, we would be safe, because it could never cross Shepherd's River. Well, then by mid-afternoon, they came through and told us we had 20 minutes. So we were totally unprepared.
The town of Newfield suffered too. In the Goose Rocks and Cape Porpoise district of Kennebunkport, more than 200 homes, most of them summer cottages, were destroyed as this fire burned its way to the Atlantic Ocean. In Hancock County, Bar Harbor, with its palatial summer homes and grand hotels, all sustained massive damage. Half of the landscape in this world-famous summer retreat was blackened.
And here is the latest roundup of conditions in the fire areas. East Waterboro, 3/4 of the town has been wiped out. Brownfield, East Brownfield, and Brownfield Center are blackened waste. 250 buildings have been destroyed. West Kennebunk, flames have reached within 3/4 of a mile of the town. Evacuation is now taking place. Here's a special item. The President today proclaimed the Maine fires a national disaster. Conditions have taken a turn for the worse. All sectors indicate the need for more firefighters, more equipment, and supplies.
Back in the larger towns and cities behind the flaming forest, the Red Cross and other relief agencies were already at work. Equipment and supplies were quickly rounded up. These were dispatched to the fire line, along with more and more firefighters. Help came, too, from many points outside the state. Shoulder to shoulder, hundreds of men fought the flames, but the fires continued to roll on and on. Here was swift disaster, terribly real, awful, frightening.
Nearly 36 Maine towns had sustained heavy losses. 9 were practically leveled, with property damage totaling nearly $70 million. Timber losses were estimated at $10 million. In today's terms, these losses would equal well over $3 billion. Hundreds of Mainers lost their jobs as many businesses also were destroyed. 16 people lost their lives. Throughout those 2 infamous weeks, hurricane-force winds caused havoc for firefighters, making control efforts extremely dangerous and often impossible.
You could hear it coming. It was just like the sound, I can't describe it. Just very loud, just a roar. And we saw this sheet of flame, and it rolled just like this, made one roll, just like you see water on the beach. And the house was gone. It exploded. And we turned to run because it wasn't not a good place to be, and the hoses were steaming.
Firefighters frequently had to drop their equipment and run from flame fronts, reaching as high as 300 feet. The intense and erratic fire was unlike anything firefighters had seen before.
It was blowing. It was a funny feeling. The embers, the smoke, you would hear roaring, just like a freight train roaring, and then there'd be complete silence. Nothing. And it was eerie, and then it would start again.
Never in Maine's history had so many people been affected by such a disaster, and never had so many people come to the aid of their fellow citizens.
You were speechless. There was nothing anywhere. And to get through the highway was something in itself. The trees were burned, the limbs were down. It was just an unmistakable mystery.
When the smoke settled, the damage was not unlike that of a massive bombing raid seen during World War II.
Just something that nobody ever believed could possibly ever happen to them. And it's like, I'm sure happened in the war when you were in Europe or something like that, and you don't know, you live in your little town, and then the first thing you know, it's all bombed out. And so what did they feel like then? What do they feel like now? And it's the same odd thing that we had here, see.
As I remember driving through town, all you could see was cellar holes and chimneys. The chimneys were still standing, and it was still smoldering, and there was steel roofing, which was basically what most every house had, was steel roofing. Of course, that survived, and that was all a rumble and mess. And, quite devastating. Something that you don't forget right off. It's kind of burns in your memory.